a beloved father, and devoted basketball coach.
Jimmy loved kids.
He loved to talk about coaching basketball and God.
Ruthlessly gunned down in his own home.
There were 10 shell casings. Whoever did this wanted to make sure that he was dead.
Leaving a whole community devastated.
I just started screaming. I literally just lost it.
Detectives follow evidence down a twisted trail.
It was what we call a whodunit. All the doors were locked to some fashion.
There was muddy footprints coming into the foyer area.
To uncover a number of suspects.
He immediately lawyered up. He didn't want to talk about anything.
He had just filed for divorce before he was killed.
Was there some sort of romantic thing gone awry?
And unveil a killer no one could have ever imagined.
They had no remorse, no confessions.
You saying that you killed him?
It shocked me very, very much. This could happen to anybody.
Cordova is a peaceful suburb just east of Memphis, Tennessee. Its wide open spaces and strong church communities make it a haven for families.
Cordova is one of those very safe neighborhoods. Kids riding up and down to the bikes. You honk at your neighbor and your neighbor waves.
It's not a place that we're accustomed to seeing violent crimes.
But in the winter of 2013, the town's carefree spirit is disrupted by a troubled call to police.
The initial call came on a Friday morning from the principal at Ridgeway High School.
Jimmy McClain had not reported to work. He was a school teacher and a basketball coach.
Jimmy was always punctual, so when he didn't show up for work, people immediately started worrying about Jimmy.
Our patrol officers go over there and they knocked on the door. Nothing. The front door was locked, the back door was locked, the garage door was shut, all the windows were locked. Nothing appeared to be opened or broke. And then one officer was able to look in through some glass doors. And then he saw something that looked like a shell casing.
Immediately on alert, officers quickly force entry into the home.
As soon as they made entry, they saw a black male on the floor with a lot of blood around him. Dead.
Homicide investigators are on the scene within minutes.
When I first arrived, we see a male victim laying in the den area of the house who appeared to have been shot multiple times.
Whoever did this wanted to make sure that he was dead.
Detectives find a wallet in the victim's pocket. The ID inside confirms this is 49-year-old Jimmy McClain.
The big thing that stood out at that time was the numerous shell casings that were scattered throughout the living portion of the residence.
There were 10 shell casings, and they were all the same caliber, 40 caliber, but they were two different brands. That puts a theory in your head. Was there two shooters, you know, one brand in one gun, one brand in the other, or was it just one shooter with mixed rounds?
Detectives can find no murder weapon at the scene, but something else grabs their attention.
There was muddy footprints coming into the foyer area, which we knew were not any of our officers' prints.
We were able to lift those prints.
I truly was hoping we could identify the type of shoe and the actual size of the shoe.
There were no signs of fingerprints to the naked eye, so we were able to swab the doorknobs, both interior and exterior on the front door, for the presence of DNA.
An exhaustive search of the house yields no sign of forced entry.
We had no signs of robbery, no signs of burglary. The big thing to me was all the doors were locked to some fashion, meaning someone locked the door on their way out upon leaving the scene. That told me that most likely our suspect had a key to the residence.
So once we realized that somebody had let themselves in, we were like, well, who's got access to these keys? Did Jimmy know the person who did this?
Detectives also attempt to discover the approximate time the murder happened.
We were able to find out there was a shots fired call that came in our dispatch around 8:50 p.m. 2 days before we found the body.
So started making sense real quick, though, that that's probably when this happened.
As police continue their investigation at the scene, Jimmy's sister, Easter, arrives.
To this day, that is the absolute worst day of my life. It's the day I came around the corner and saw yellow tape around my baby brother's house, who I love so dearly. The police asked me, "Ma'am, do you know who lives here?" I said, "My brother is my brother. Where's my brother?"
Officers confirm Easter's worst fears and tell her that her brother has been killed.
I just started screaming, just started just howling.
Detectives ask Easter and Jimmy's mother, Jamela, to come downtown. Through her tears, Easter tells detectives how young Jimmy grew up to be such a beloved figure.
We grew up in eastern Arkansas. Jimmy is the fourth of 8 kids. He was intelligent, precocious, very athletic.
From a young age, Jimmy McClain had a passion for basketball.
Jimmy walked tall, slender, like a greyhound. He's real tight muscle, flexible, agile.
His nickname was Full Time because he never played half speed. He always played full speed, and that's how he took life.
Jimmy had played basketball with Scottie Pippen. Jimmy considered Scottie Pippen a friend, and I think it was likewise.
After 7 years of professional basketball, Jimmy took up coaching.
Jimmy loved teaching and mentoring. He just was a natural leader with youth.
Jimmy had found his calling, but one part of his life remained unfulfilled.
The thing that he talked to me the most about was his desire to be married.
In the late 1990s, Jimmy met the partner he'd always dreamed of. Her name was Carla.
He was very happy, very excited. He took his relationship very seriously. The next summer, they got married.
Jimmy also became a father to Carla's 2 children from a previous relationship, 16-year-old Tiffany and 11-year-old Dwayne.
He never had children, so he was looking forward to being a father. They all looked up to him as a mentor and as a father, and he spent a lot of time trying to be sure that they were on a good path. He talked to me a lot about the things he was going to do with Dwayne and Tiffany, and he especially wanted to involve Dwayne in summer basketball camps and so forth. He was very serious about being a good husband and a good father.
Together with Carla, Jimmy raised Dwayne and Tiffany as his own. But after 8 years of marriage, cracks started to show in their relationship.
Carla wanted the divorce at first. I do believe that the problems were related to something that occurred early on in their relationship.
Initially, Jimmy had resisted the idea.
I overheard Jimmy telling her that it doesn't make sense for us to be separated. There's nothing wrong. We're not having problems.
But eventually, Carla and Jimmy split up, and after 4 years of separation, Jimmy finally agreed to make it official.
I don't think I really got the full story about exactly what changed his mind and his heart toward her. But he had just filed for divorce a couple of weeks before he was killed.
Detectives are suspicious. Was the timing just a coincidence? Or did Jimmy's looming divorce have something to do with his murder?
We immediately thought we need to talk to Carla.
Had Jimmy and Carla been in some sort of argument or confrontation?
Coming up, detectives unearth disturbing clues.
There had been a scandal at the high school.
Why are these numbers erased during the same time period as the homicide?
And the truth blindsides everyone.
We had found the needle in the haystack.
They had admitted to killing a basketball coach.
Police have just learned that Jimmy McClain filed for divorce 2 weeks before he was killed. And now detectives need to know if animosity between Jimmy and his soon-to-be ex-wife Carla could have been a motive for murder.
We had asked, Carla and Tiffany and Dwayne, her biological children, to come town.
Dwayne and Tiffany wait in the next room while police talk to Carla, starting with her relationship with Jimmy.
She says, look, we were going through a divorce, but it wasn't because he was doing anything bad. She said that we fell out of love.
Carla tells police that when she and Jimmy were married in 2001, Jimmy treated her kids, Dwayne and Tiffany, like they were his own. But as they grew into their late teens, Carla and Jimmy's parenting styles started to clash.
Carla did advise that Jimmy was really hard on her kids. Jimmy was very discipline-oriented, and she always took the side of the kids. In her eyes, they could do nothing wrong. She wasn't going to let Jimmy over-discipline. And some of the issues is what transformed into this growing away from each other.
Detectives ask Carla directly if she stands to gain from Jimmy's death.
She did advise that she had a life insurance policy through her work where Jimmy was on the policy and she would have been the beneficiary.
Was the life insurance payout a motive for Carla to kill Jimmy? Knowing evidence from the crime scene suggests the killer let themselves in. Detectives need to find out if Carla still had access to Jimmy's home.
We actually did ask Carla if she had a key to the house, and she did not have a key that she could remember.
Undeterred, they ask where Carla was on the night of the murder.
She didn't go out and do anything. She said it was raining that night. It was nasty weather. She actually went to her bedroom and read a book. We asked if anybody could verify that. She said, well, my son, Dwayne, because he was at home as well.
To confirm Carla's alibi, police bring in Dwayne and Tiffany, who are waiting in the next room.
When we saw Dwayne, he's a 19-year-old, kid. Dwayne gave a statement advising to us that, when his mom came home, that he just sat and chilled at the house. He didn't have a cell phone, so he would use his mom's. His mom said that she was down in his bedroom. He said he was up in his bedroom, and they didn't see each other the rest of the night.
Dwayne's account lines up with Carla's, but detectives are curious about whether Dwayne had any conflicts with Jimmy.
Tell me about Jimmy. How was y'all's relationship?
It was cool, but we bumped heads a little bit sometimes. He was straight other than that. He was cool. He fun, loving person.
Dwayne just was like, I can't believe this happened. I don't know who would have done this.
Police turn their attention to his sister Tiffany, and right away sense some tension.
When we interviewed Tiffany, she admitted her and Jimmy butted heads on things, and she actually moved out. She didn't like being parented by him.
Detectives ask where she was at the time of the murder.
Advised she was at home with her boyfriend during the time frame all that Wednesday evening. So at the time we got through interviewing Carla, Tiffany, and Dwayne, there was not anything to lead us to believe that they had any involvement with the death of Jimmy.
To help confirm their alibis, detectives ask for Carla and Tiffany's cell phones.
We were going to use the technology of the cell phone pinging to corroborate where they were the night of the murder.
While they wait for those results, detectives canvass Jimmy's friends and colleagues to find out who else might have had a key to his house.
Early on in the investigation, we had to look at everything. With Jimmy being a high school teacher, with Jimmy being a basketball coach, there was multiple people that could have done this.
We had to start going back to who knew Jimmy. And the first thing we did was work. We spoke with all the teachers. All the teachers liked Jimmy. Other coaches liked Jimmy. The principal liked Jimmy.
Detectives can find no one with a key or even a bad word to say about Jimmy.
He was the kindest, gentlest, most compassionate person that I know. But for somebody to snatch your loved one from you out of their own selfish reasons, it really is heartbreaking, and it makes you mad.
3 days into the investigation, detectives receive Jimmy's cell phone back from forensics and discover that he was texting shortly before he was killed.
He was texting with a female subject, and they were back and forth talking about some directions and basically good night. The last text we identified as a subject named Pam Smith.
The name is new to police, but when they compare the time of her last text with the report of gunshots on the night of the murder, they realize they were just minutes apart. With this new lead, Pam Smith becomes detectives' newest suspect. Who is she? And was she involved in Jimmy's murder?
When you read the text messages between her and Jimmy, the lingering question had to be, was there some sort of, romantic thing gone awry?
Detectives have just discovered that Jimmy McClain was texting with a woman named Pam Smith on the night he was murdered.
We were able to determine that Pam was the last person that Jimmy had contacted.
Investigators need to speak to Pam to see if she has any information that points to the killer.
We called just to say, this is the sheriff's office. Do you know Jimmy? And she was like, yeah, that's my boyfriend.
Detectives inform Pam of Jimmy's murder and carefully gauge her response.
She was extremely distraught. She was like, do I need to come down there? What do I need to do? We still had to figure out who she was. Is she married? Is there an affair situation? Is this a boyfriend, girlfriend situation?
Pam tells detectives that she and Jimmy had only been dating for 6 months.
We were able to sort of dig into the relationship between Pam and Jimmy, what seemed like a healthy relationship.
Pamela claims she was 3 hours away in Nashville at the time of the murder, and she's more than happy to turn over her phone so police can verify her statement.
After talking to her, there was nothing that she gave any kind of suspicion or anything.
Detectives have one more question for Pamela.
We actually did ask Pam if she had a key to the house, and she advised that she did not have a key.
But she says she knows who does.
Pam had overheard a phone call. Jimmy was telling his wife, Carla, that she could come by the house while he was gone to pick up some mail that had come to the house for her. Pam took note that when they left the house, Jimmy didn't leave the mail in the mailbox or on the front door, but he left it inside the house, which told Pam that Carla had a key to the house.
Police believe the killer had a key, but Carla told detectives she didn't have one. The discrepancy raises a red flag.
Is it possible that Carla had a key to the house? How can we prove that she didn't come into the house the night of the murder?
There's only one way to know for sure.
We used the technology of the cell phone pinging to follow her from her work all the way to home.
The cell phone data indicates Carla was home all night, and her daughter Tiffany was too.
Everybody's statements made sense where they were. There was no reason to pursue any other questions with them or Pam at that moment.
Before Carla and Tiffany can be completely ruled out, police must corroborate the calls and texts on their phones with the complete records from the cell companies.
And those can take several days, depending on the circumstance.
A week after the murder, Jimmy's loved ones pay their respects at his funeral.
Jimmy's funeral was held at a local Church of Christ, probably a couple thousand people there. Jimmy touched a lot of people.
Going to Jimmy's funeral was a tough process for myself. So many people loved him.
The mystery of who could have killed Jimmy is on everyone's mind, and grief-stricken loved ones are desperate for answers.
The family was very concerned, but I felt that absolutely the truth would come out.
It was hard waiting and hoping that they get that person before it's too late.
It's very frustrating. After several days, it gets worse. It gets harder to solve, and the family starts to lose hope in you.
The day after the funeral, detectives received the forensics reports.
There was no extra DNA under the fingernails of him to see if he got physically close enough to maybe grab the suspect or anything like that. We didn't get any fingerprints that weren't supposed to be there. Jimmy's prints were the only ones there.
The report isn't all bad news for detectives.
An expert at Nike was able to determine the muddy shoe prints in the entryway of the house most likely came from a Nike Air Force One.
These are basketball-type shoes. They're between the size 10 and 11.
Before detectives can follow up on this new lead, their investigation takes a bizarre twist.
There had been a scandal at the high school.
Ridgeway High School had a very good basketball team. They were one of the top in the state. We started hearing about a student at the school who had just recently gotten in some trouble.
Detectives need to know if the scandal is linked to Jimmy's murder. Staff tells them the player at the center of the storm is number 22, Mackenzie Sewell.
Obviously, he was a fairly good basketball player, but he was also 2 years older than people that he was playing with. He was actually an adult, falsified documents to still play high school basketball because he was attempting to try to get a scholarship to play.
A week after Jimmy is found dead, the scandal explodes into the headlines.
This man used a fake transcript to enroll here at Ridgeway High, and our sources tell us the man has a GED, but enrolled here simply so he could play basketball.
A humiliated Mackenzie is kicked off the team and out of Ridgeway High.
The dream of the NBA is over. The coaches were like, oh my goodness, because the whole school gets punished for it. They get disqualified from being able to play.
The scandal raises a key question for detectives. Had Jimmy discovered the truth about Mackenzie and been silenced before he could report him to authorities?
Did Jimmy initiate this whole situation? Because we knew Jimmy was an ethical individual. If Mackenzie thought Jimmy had anything to do with this, then this could be a reason why Jimmy was murdered.
Police are eager to talk to Mackenzie, but that's not going to happen.
He immediately lawyered up. He didn't want to talk about anything.
Detectives try a different approach. They go to speak with the person who registered him at Ridgeway High, his mother, Chandra Nicole. What she tells them is more bizarre than they could have imagined.
What we found out is that was his wife.
Detectives hunting the killer of high school basketball coach Jimmy McClain are investigating whether a scandal involving one of his players is linked to his death. Now they discovered that the player's mother is actually his wife. She admits to helping Mackenzie falsify his age, but says it wasn't Jimmy who had discovered the deception.
She had actually called in to say that he was falsifying records, that he wasn't supposed to be in the school because they had gotten into an argument.
While enjoying his second go-around in high school, Mackenzie began a relationship with a fellow student. When his wife caught wind of it, she told the school about Mackenzie's scam.
It was a domestic situation between him and the wife. Really didn't have anything to do with Jimmy. Didn't follow Jimmy at all.
Once again, a promising lead evaporates into thin air, and over a week into the investigation, police are starting over.
I was back to square one again. I was starting to question myself and wonder, like, we're gonna get anywhere with this thing.
I was starting to be concerned. I wanted to know when people were going to be charged.
Just as investigators begin to fear the trail growing cold, they receive the complete cell phone records for Jimmy's ex-wife, Carla, and her daughter, Tiffany.
We had ordered direct cell phone records to corroborate the exact records that we had initially dumped. You're talking hundreds, even thousands of records at times to look through, to see if you can find where there's a discrepancy in something.
After days of hard work, police get the break they've been praying for.
Everybody else's phones were making sense, but Carla's phone did not make sense. We noticed there were actually people being texted between 6 and 9, 2 different phone numbers. And that was the time frame of the homicide. Those texts were conveniently erased off Carla's phone. So that automatically piqued interest. So we were trying to identify the 2 phone numbers that were deleted. We identified one of them as a subject named Robert, and then another subject named Heather. We looked up Robert real quick and found out Robert was a convicted felon for dope dealing. But why are these numbers erased the night of the murder? At that point, I felt it necessary to call Carla back in and talk to her again, and then further identify maybe Heather and Robert since we had names on them.
When detectives press Carla about the texts, she tells them they belong to her son and Jimmy's former stepson, Dwayne. Detectives already know that Dwayne uses his mom's phone since he doesn't own one of his own.
Carla said that Heather was a girlfriend. She says, oh, she's a good girl. She's a girl that lives out in Cordova, not too far. Carla said wasn't too fond of Robert, but she did admit he and Dwayne were friends. She says, well, I don't really like him hanging out with Robert too much. You know, he's a troublemaker.
Knowing that Dwayne was texting with a known felon during the time frame of Jimmy's murder is a red flag for detectives. So they asked Dwayne to join his mom down at the station.
The way we approached Dwayne was like, hey, we're having to kind of start over and get a more detailed events of the night. And he advised when his mom got home, he had the phone, he spoke with one of his friends, and then Heather came over.
When detectives finish with Carla and Dwayne, they quickly contact Heather to see if she can confirm Dwayne's story.
She said, I went to Dwayne's house that evening, later that evening. So she has confirmed that she went over there.
It seems like it's another dead end. Yet when detectives follow up with a question about the basketball shoe print found at the crime scene, the interview takes a promising turn.
We asked about the shoes, and she said, oh, Dwayne has these Air Force Ones, and he wears a size 10.5, which fit the crime scene. And at that point, she said, and I remember seeing those Air Force Ones out on the porch, but I hadn't seen them since then. She said, I even have a picture of them. And when she showed a picture, it was a picture of Dwayne staying in the kitchen with a AR-15 rifle and these Air Force Ones.
Police quickly get a search warrant for Carla's home.
Searching the closets and everything else, so there's no Air Force Ones in there. There's no shoes that match the homicide. took pictures of his room, and we left. We didn't come out at that house with anything.
So far, linking Dwayne to the crime has not proven fruitful. But detectives have another strategy.
We know for a fact that there was text messages between Robert and Dwayne during the homicide. We feel that those texts could be very important. Since he'd erased them off his phone, we couldn't get them. So my goal was to get a search warrant for Robert's phone, hoping that the text messages were still on his phone, visible where we could see them.
While police wait for a warrant to be approved, officers keep an eye on Robert.
I arrived, and within a few hours of setting up surveillance, Robert Collins came out of his house.
At that point, our detectives went to talk to him, and Robert took off running.
Detectives investigating the murder of Jimmy McClain believe text on the phone of convicted felon Robert Collins may point to the killer.
When Robert took off running, he ran a good ways, but we needed to catch him. We didn't want him to destroy his phone or anything like that.
As Robert Collins was running away from the scene, he tossed something.
Our detectives ended up catching him on foot, and when they did, he had a large amount of narcotics.
The illegal drugs give detectives reason to arrest Robert. But even more incriminating is what he tried to discard as he fled.
When we saw that he had tossed a weapon, we immediately thought maybe that was the weapon that was involved.
So in the back of my head, I'm thinking, oh, this is fantastic. Are we going to solve the homicide right now? You get excited, like, hey, we're there, we're going to get this.
Police bring Robert down to the station, but before they question him, they carefully examine his gun and phone.
I think it was very quickly determined it wasn't the weapon from the scene.
Still, detectives have plenty of leverage on Robert.
He's a felon convicted with a handgun. Now he's got another handgun on him and a large amount of drugs. This could easily go federal. Maybe that could help us out. Maybe he'd want to work something out. He wouldn't budge on anything. I don't want to talk to y'all. Basically, he said, just put me in a jail cell. I'll go do my time. You just don't get that. That's just not normal.
Is Robert trying to protect his buddy, Dwayne, or just himself? If he won't give anything up, detectives hope his cell phone might.
I was hoping that the text messages were still on his phone. Started going through it. Well, Robert had erased his text too. But what Robert didn't erase were some pictures that we were able to get. The day before the homicide, Robert on his phone had a picture of a handgun. It is a similar gun, a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson Sigma, the same caliber used. What was unique about the handgun was not the handgun itself, but where the handgun was laying. And it was laying on a very unique bedspread. When I saw the bedspread, I was like, I've seen that bedspread before. I said, go get the search warrant pictures from when we picked Dwayne up. Well, as we scrolled through more pictures, we finally found a deleted picture that had Dwayne in front of the bedspread. So it tied it all in with the gun in the picture.
Police now know the gun likely belonged to Dwayne or someone in his inner circle. But who used it to gun Jimmy down in cold blood? Detectives hope to find out from Robert himself.
So when we put Robert in jail, we were hoping Robert would say something on the phone. The first phone call that Robert made was to a young guy. First thing that Robert said to the guy was, hey man, that pit bull, it's real sick. And the guy kind of like, I don't think he caught what he was saying. He's like, oh yeah, just laughing, I got you. And Robert, you could see, was very frustrated. Like, no man, I'm not kidding. You need to get rid of that pit bull, it's sick. Bro, I shouldn't have sold it to you. We did have indication that pit bull was most likely the gun.
And real sick. put it in street terms, means it has a body on it.
Detectives traced the owner of the phone Robert called.
It was a kid named Jamarius that lived in the Cordova area.
We believe that Jamarius Cooper had in his possession the firearm that was used in the killing of Jimmy McClain.
Police get an emergency search warrant and race over to Jamarius's home before he can dispose of the gun.
When we got Jamarius Cooper's bedroom, we systematically started going through places that things could be hidden.
We were going through it, and we weren't finding anything. And then one of my detectives, probably into the 30th box or so, he's like, I got something. And I was like, do what?
When I saw that gun, I immediately felt like we had found the needle in the haystack. We had known through this investigation that most likely we were looking for a very specific gun. That is the same style gun that we're looking for. Same caliber, most likely the same brand, the same model.
At that moment, I was like, Jimmy's here. He's guiding us. He's telling us it's all here. He's not making it easy. He's making this puzzle, but it's slowly coming together. So immediately took the gun and had TBI process it. Within a couple hours, they were calling us back on, hey, this is the gun that was used in the homicide of Jimmy McClain. That does bring some emotion to you. You're like, oh my gosh, this work, this time, and we're going into 30 days here. I mean, nobody finds a gun used in a homicide in 30 days.
Police need to talk to Jamarius, but before they can track him down, they get an alarming call.
We have a call from Cumberland County Sheriff's Office, and the deputy there said, hey, listen, we just had something weird come in. A white female came running into our station. She was very distraught. She was in her pajamas, and that she said that she wanted to pass on some information, that her husband was upset because his nephew had admitted to killing a basketball coach.
Detectives investigating the murder of Jimmy McClain have just received an unexpected call from a sheriff's office 5 hours away.
And the deputy there said, a white female came running into our station. Her husband was upset because his nephew had admitted to killing a basketball coach. Her husband was Carla's brother, which was Dwayne's uncle.
Detectives are stunned. Dwayne's uncle is Donald Page, a known felon. Detectives bring him in, knowing they may only have one shot to get him to talk.
He was I'm not talking to y'all, I ain't got nothing to say.
Police remind him of one simple fact. If he's withholding information, that makes him an accessory to murder.
And all of a sudden, he said, look, my nephew said he did it.
Dwayne had, in fact, taken him aside and said, Unc, I had to handle my business. And Donald said he looked at him and said, are you saying that you killed him? Dwayne said to him, I had to stand up for my mom.
Dwayne, he loved his mom. They were having some financial issues, and Dwayne thought that if this divorce could just be done with, I could get the money from the house. And I think Dwayne took it upon himself to do whatever he wanted to do, and which unfortunately led to the homicide.
There was tension between Jimmy and Dwayne already. So there was that divorce, money, financial implication, motive.
With an accessory charge hanging over his head, Donald agrees to testify against his nephew.
At that point, I called the prosecutor and told him what we had, and he said, I think it's time to go lock up Dwayne Moore for homicide.
On March 26, 2013, Dwayne Moore is charged with the murder of his own stepfather.
I'm telling you, he just had no remorse, no confessions. He just didn't have any care in the world whatsoever.
When I heard Dwayne had been charged with Jimmy's murder, I felt a lot of relief.
I was shocked to know that someone that he had influenced this long in this young man's life that would take his life.
It went deep to my core as far as emotionally. This was unbelievable because of who Jimmy was.
14 months later, Dwayne Moore stands before the Memphis judge and jury. The prosecution lays out what they believe happened the night of the murder.
Dwayne had it in his head that he was going over there to kill him. He knew that there was a key to the house that Carla might have forgot about. I think he waited until he saw Jimmy pull in, let himself in that front door. Pulled the gun out as soon as he saw Jimmy and started shooting. I think he did it in about 5 minutes at the most. I think he just went in there and started blasting away.
To try to imagine what Jimmy must have gone through in the final moments that he was living is extremely painful. The awful terror he must have felt, knowing that his life was about to end.
On June 27, 2014, Dwayne Moore is convicted and sentenced to 22 years in prison without the possibility of parole.
It hurts. It hurts that somebody thought so little of my family that they could take somebody so precious to us.
While Jimmy's family still misses him every day, his love for educating young people lives on.
To honor Jimmy's memory, we established a scholarship in his name at the University of Arkansas at Conway.
I think Jimmy would want to be remembered by being a godly man, a kind man, and a peaceful man.
That's what helps me to try to let the anger go. Don't be mad. Just thank God that he was here and that he was my brother for as long as he was. I miss him and I love him.
For more information on an unexpected killer, go to oxygen.com.
A mysterious woman lures a businessman across state lines with the promise of a lucrative deal. When he vanishes, authorities turn to the FBI for help. Suspicions point to a bitter business rival, but the suspect stonewalls investigators. Agents would use state-of-the-art technology to find friends and lovers who might be willing to reveal the truth.
A wealthy businessman went to Florida to make one last deal before he retired, but he never returned home to his millions. Authorities examined who was closest to the victim and who stood to gain from his disappearance. But this time, conventional rules did not apply. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. In a case that spanned the entire East Coast, agents would have to untangle a web of sex, money, and vengeance that led to murder.
Newark International Airport in New Jersey. On Saturday, February 24, 1996, Kiwi Airlines Flight 45 took off for West Palm Beach, Florida. 58-year-old Frank Black was on board. Black owned and operated a successful school bus and transportation company in Andover, New Jersey.
Thank you.
He had made millions and was on his way to Florida to meet a new industry contact. Black told his family and co-workers he would be home Monday in time for another meeting. He also told them that his contact in Florida, a woman named Mia Giordano, was to pick him up at the airport.
How you doing? Good.
She would take him to meet others involved in the lucrative business deal.
Glad you can make it. I think we're playing for a little while.
Good.
Should we go?
Privately, Black hoped to retire after closing the deal.
Good.
When Black failed to return on Monday, his family contacted the New Jersey State Police. Detective Sergeant Lee Liddy was one of the state detectives assigned the missing persons case.
He was the kind of guy that he would always phone home. He always wanted to know what was going on with his business. He was a hands-on type of guy. Without Frank, the business really didn't run. And that's why they were concerned when they didn't hear from him. All of a sudden he disappeared, because Frank wasn't the kind of guy who would just walk away from his business.
New Jersey investigators interviewed Black's daughter, Leanna, and his girlfriend and office manager, Sally Roberts. Leanna said her father had missed an important meeting with her to discuss the sale of his business. He also had not answered calls to his cell phone. Sally Roberts recalled that the woman from Florida, Mia Giordano, had phoned the office many times recently but never left her number. The Florida woman claimed to represent a company named Valdez Exporting. Giordano provided a description of herself so Black could recognize her at the airport. She said she was 5'1" and blonde. A detective visited the travel agent who booked Black's trip.
Traveling, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The agent confirmed that Black purchased a one-way ticket to Florida. He didn't bother to rent a car since his contact had arranged to pick him up. Airline records corroborated that Black had boarded the flight.
No hotel.
But he had not registered at any hotels upon his arrival in West Palm Beach. An examination of Black's records revealed that his credit cards had been used after his arrival in Florida. To follow the credit card trail, New Jersey detectives contacted the Fort Pierce office of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. FDLE Special Agent Michael Driscoll was assigned the case.
Frank Black's credit card was used at the Embassy Suites in Riviera Beach between approximately 1 in the morning and 2 in the morning. Okay, now we're talking about from February 24th into February 25th. And then at 4 o'clock in the morning, his credit card, a different credit card, but Frank Black's credit card was used to purchase gas at a gasoline station in North Miami.
To investigators, this seemed odd since he hadn't rented a car. The state agent interviewed the employee who had worked on February 25th. When shown a photo of Black, the attendant said he didn't recognize him. The station's pumps all had credit card slots. No one would have had contact with Black or whoever was using his credit card. The employee didn't recall seeing anyone fitting Mia Giordano's description. Driscoll contacted the Florida Secretary of State Corporation Division to get an address for Valdez Exporting, Mia Giordano's company.
That looks real good. Okay, catch you later. Bye.
He found no such company registered in the state. He also attempted to locate Mia Giordano herself.
We did a very extensive search to identify any Mia Giordano in Florida, and we couldn't find any, I believe, any Mia Giordanos in Florida, or any that would even come remotely close. And we checked Florida as well as New Jersey, and with negative results.
On March 1st, a detective from the New Jersey State Police traveled to Florida where Frank Black's trail ended. Nobody had heard from Black in 5 days. Detectives now believed the millionaire had met with foul play. Their most likely suspect, a woman calling herself Mia Giordano, was untraceable. Investigators' focus turned to the phone calls Black received on the days leading up to his trip to Florida.
We obtained the phone records of Frank Black, which identified phone calls from a residence in Jupiter, and the residence in Jupiter was rented. It was a townhome rented by a girl identified as Lisa Costello.
She wasn't blonde, but she was 5'1". Mia Giordano had described herself as being exactly that height. The calls from Lisa Costello matched the times when Mia Giordano allegedly phoned Black to set up the meeting in Florida.
Mia Giordano was a fictitious figure. She never existed. And she was supposed to set up the deal with Frank Black. Mia Giordano was actually Lisa Costello.
Investigators took Costello's photo to the hotel where Black's credit card had been used on February 25th. The resort was on the Strip at Riviera Beach. The state agent asked to speak to the clerk who had been on duty the morning in question. While he waited, he checked the phone that had been used with Black's credit card. Like the gas pump, the phone required no signature from a customer, just a credit card. Anyone could have made the calls. Karen Voorhees had worked the front desk on the morning in question. But she did not recognize a photo of Frank Black. She did recall waiting on another customer that morning. At around 2 a.m., a dark-haired woman asked for a room. The hotel was booked, so she used a payphone several times to query other hotels. It was the same time Frank Black's credit card was used at the phone. Voorhees described the woman as being in her 30s with brown hair and standing a little over 5 feet tall. Driscoll showed Voorhees a photographic lineup of 6 women. Without hesitation, the clerk picked out Lisa Costello.
Lisa Costello was now really the primary suspect. I mean, we did have some evidence on her that then we checked the car rental agencies by the West Palm Beach airport and found out that Lisa Costello rented a car just shortly before the time that Frank Black's flight arrived.
Investigators found the car at the airport rental lot. A subpoena allowed them to impound it for an evidence search by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. But examiners would find no trace of Frank Black in the car. There was no physical evidence linking Lisa Costello to the missing businessman. Florida investigators began covert surveillance on Lisa Costello. They followed the suspect for days to establish a routine and determine her contacts. They soon learned that Costello was dating a man named Alan Mackerly. Investigators began to tail Mackerly. Like Frank Black, he also owned a bus company in New Jersey, but was now living in Florida. The two men had known each other most of their lives.
Over the years, Alan Mackerly and Frank Black built up a rivalry. The two bus companies are about 10 miles apart. So even though they each had their own contracts and their own business, they were always vying for the same contracts in the same business.
Phone records indicated recent calls to Black from Mackerly's Florida home. This seemed strange since the two men were fierce rivals. Detectives went to speak with the manager of Black's bus company. Sally Roberts said Black and Mackerly used to be friends, but their business rivalry had made them enemies. She detailed the last time she had seen the men together. It was at an industry banquet in January of 1996. She and Frank were talking with friends when she saw Mackerly approaching. Angry that Black had stolen one of his major bus contracts, Mackerly threatened his rival.
He said he was going to get him and put him under. That could mean put him out of business, and it could also possibly mean he was going to kill him someday.
Black took the threat seriously. Afterwards, he wouldn't go to any meeting that Mackerly might attend unless he had someone with him. Investigators contacted Mackerly to ask him if he had seen or spoken to Frank Black recently. Mackerly flatly denied calling him in the days preceding Black's trip to Florida.
Him denying that and us knowing phone calls have been made from his house to Frank Black's business obviously indicated something was wrong.
Investigators believed that Mackerly and Costello had probably killed Frank Black, but they needed stronger proof. They turned to Assistant State Attorney Robert Belanger.
One of the first investigative tools that the FDLE wanted to use was wiretaps. So you have to show a really compelling reason for listening to someone's telephone conversations. So we drafted those applications and orders and obtained an order allowing us to listen to Alan Mackerly's telephone conversations.
Unfortunately, investigators heard very few phone conversations between Mackerly and Costello. This was because Costello was now living with Mackerly. If they were talking about Black's disappearance, it wasn't over the phone. In order to record any incriminating conversations, investigators would have to bug Mackerly's house. Assistant State Attorney Lawrence Merman hoped they had enough probable cause to get inside.
Being able to actually enter someone's home and plant a listening device is extremely restrictive, and the probable cause that's required is very high. The situations that would warrant that are very limited. This case actually presented that situation.
A judge signed the warrant, and investigators planted listening devices in Mackerly's home. They set up outside, watching and listening.
Got it.
Hopefully, the couple would discuss what happened to Frank Black. Alan Mackerly and Lisa Costello were extremely cautious. Investigators believed the couple knew they were listening.
And every time that we would hear them starting to talk, they would turn the radio up in the kitchen loud. So we probably have several hundred hours of tapes with nothing but music on it.
Once again, investigators came up empty-handed.
Our Chief Assistant State Attorney Dave Morgan had even commented to me after we failed to get anything on the wiretaps, it looks like Alan Mackerly's gotten away with murder.
Alan, what are you doing?
With Black's body still missing, Mackerly and Costello could elude authorities as long as they maintained their silence. In June of 1996, Florida state agents believed that Alan Mackerly and his girlfriend Lisa Costello had murdered 58-year-old millionaire Frank Black. But investigators had little evidence against the couple, and Black's body was still missing. They checked morgues in Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade counties where Black was last known to have traveled. There were no unidentified bodies matching Frank Black's description. If Mackerly and Costello had killed Black, they had covered their tracks well. Florida Department of Law Enforcement Special Agent Michael Driscoll expressed his frustration to his friend FBI Special Agent Jay Miller.
We used to play racquetball together, and he'd ask me about how this case was going, and I'd tell him, you know, a little bit about it, not a whole lot, and he'd say, well, if you ever need a hand, and I'd be happy to help out.
In June of 1996, Special Agent Jay Miller asked to be assigned the case out of the FBI's Fort Pierce resident agency.
And even though we were close friends, initially I did not know a lot of the details about Frank Black's disappearance. But as I could sense his frustration, I was able to elicit more information about the case, and we were able then to come to an understanding that we needed to look at this thing again from the start.
Though investigators believed Mackerly killed Black over a disputed busing contract, wiretaps and listening devices had failed to tie him to any crime. Investigators' best lead was still Black's alleged meeting with Costello. Perhaps if subpoenaed and confronted with the evidence, she would turn on Mackerly. It was a gamble that could jeopardize their entire case.
By giving anyone, in this case Lisa Costello, a subpoena, it compels her to come in and give information, and it gives her immunity. Hypothetically, if she came in and admitted she killed Frank Black, she would be immune from that statement. You could not use that statement against her.
On June 13, 1996, Lisa Costello appeared before a Florida grand jury. When questioned by state attorneys, she was uncooperative and hostile. The judge cautioned her that if she did not answer, she would be jailed for contempt. Costello ignored his warnings. Investigators believed her refusal to cooperate confirmed she was involved in Black's disappearance. But it would take more than a hunch to solve the case. The gamble to subpoena Costello backfired. Now that Mackerly's closest ally was sitting behind bars, investigators had no potential witnesses to turn on the suspected murderer. Lacking further leads or physical evidence, the case against Mackerly might never make it to trial. Special Agent Michael Driscoll and his team were determined to keep this from happening.
We heard information that, let's just say from a confidential source, that there was a witness who wanted to talk but was concerned about, one, that witness's own involvement, and two, Alan Mackerly's violence. Felt that Alan Mackerly was a violent person and that maybe there'd be retaliation if this unknown and unidentified witness would talk.
That witness was Bill Anderson. A former Marine pilot, Anderson was one of Alan McAlee's closest friends. Agents interviewed him at his home in Florida, just down the street from McAlee. Anderson had also owned a bus company in New Jersey and had been a commercial pilot after a decade of military service.
So now we had two investigators, Driscoll and myself, and a prosecutor, Belanger, all being Marines, and then the person who we believe could be the key to solving the case, Bill Anderson, being a Marine. And so I think there was some camaraderie right there from the start.
Investigators felt that bond would help them develop Anderson as a witness. He told the agents his friendship with McAlee had been strained recently, but he was reluctant to detail McAlee's relationship with Frank Black. The agents felt Anderson knew something that could break the case wide open.
There was a little hesitancy on his part. We took it easy on him and gave him a little space, gave him the opportunity to do whatever he needed to do, to confer with counsel or whatever. In our minds, we knew that we were talking to the man that had the answers, and he wasn't telling us.
The agents met with Anderson on many occasions and slowly won his confidence. They knew he was loyal to his friend Alan McAlee, but they felt his sense of honor would eventually cause him to turn. Despite Anderson's lingering doubts, agents believed he was ready to talk by early August. They suspected a subpoena would help him justify turning against his friend.
In my experience, good, honest, hard-working people that flew fighter jets in the Marine Corps would have a difficult time going under oath before the whole world and God and lying about it.
Investigators had to take the chance. Like Costello, if Anderson had any part in the crime, his statements could not be used to prosecute him for murder. "5 months after the disappearance of millionaire Frank Black, investigators had little evidence to support their theory that Black was murdered by his business rival, Alan McAlee. Looking for a fresh lead, investigators subpoenaed McAlee's close friend, Bill Anderson. Anderson had been reluctant to talk, but after a month, the former Marine's sense of honor prevailed. He began by telling investigators that Alan McAlee had purchased a plane earlier that year. McAlee asked Anderson to become his private pilot, since Anderson had experience flying fighter jets and commercial airliners. In exchange, Anderson could use McAlee's plane as he wished. In March of 1996, while staying at a hotel in Leesburg, Florida, to supervise repairs on the plane, Anderson was contacted by McAlee. His friend said he needed him to take the plane out over the ocean. Anderson explained that the aircraft would be grounded for several more days. He suggested they rent another plane. McAlee insisted on using his own plane. He didn't want anybody else to know about the flight. Anderson asked why.
McAlee told Bill that he had shot Frank Black and that they had wrapped his body up in plastic, that they had taken the body out in the ocean and thrown it out in the ocean, and that the bag did not sink. And he went on to tell Bill that it didn't sink, so he took a knife and stuck some holes in it, and the body did sink.
McAlee told Anderson he was worried that the body had surfaced. He wanted to fly over the area to make sure it hadn't. Anderson refused.
Anderson was shocked. I mean, I think he was truly shocked. Anderson, again, was in the bus business, as was McAlee and Black. And Anderson and Black were not friends. Anderson did not like Black in the least either. But still, over a business rivalry, you don't kill somebody.
According to Anderson, Mackerly murdered Black in the foyer of his house. The former Marine pilot confirmed what investigators had suspected all along.
It was the big break in the case. I mean, this was the moment we were all waiting for. And I remember explaining to him right away that, Bill, we're going to have to do a covert recording of you rehashing this conversation with Alan Mackerly.
Without a body or murder weapon, they would need Mackerly's confession on tape. Anderson's testimony was good, but in court it would be his word against Mackerly's. Anderson told prosecutor Robert Belanger that he was reluctant to wear a wire.
He was afraid of Mackerly because he admitted that he had just killed someone, and Mackerly had also told him about an acquaintance up in New Jersey that got convicted of a crime because someone wore a wire, and he told Bill Anderson, if anyone ever wore a wire on me, I'd kill them.
The investigators promised Anderson police protection. He agreed to wear the wire. The plan was to lure Mackerly to Anderson's house.
You'll be okay, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, this is confident. This is well concealed, so you don't have to worry about it.
FBI techs wired Anderson for sound and hid a video camera in the kitchen. When the equipment was in place, Anderson called Mackerly.
I'll be here.
He told him he'd been served a subpoena and wanted to talk about what he should do. Mackerly said he would be right over. In case something went wrong, Agent Driscoll would remain hidden in the house to protect Anderson. When the team outside saw Mackerly approaching, they would radio Driscoll to hide.
Yeah. Well, in a minute.
While waiting, investigators spotted telephone repairmen. Mackerly was paranoid about being bugged. If he saw the workers, he might think they were undercover agents.
We knew that if he came to that house and saw these telephone company trucks, that it would have been all over as far as the investigation.
Mackerly would be there any minute. The investigators quickly ordered the repairmen to leave. They then concealed the dig site. The investigators made it back to the car just before Mackerly pulled up. The investigators tried to alert the men in the house, but they received no response. They radioed again. Still nothing. They had no way to know if Driscoll had received their call. He hadn't. The agent had seconds to hide.
Come in.
Anderson led Mackerly to the kitchen and sat down at the table as planned. He showed Mackerly the subpoena. Mackerly was hesitant to talk.
And he wouldn't talk loudly. He was pointing to the walls and saying, no, whispering like this, no, nobody knows. Whispering so that he couldn't be heard in Anderson's house. Not that he suspected Bill Anderson, but because he expected that the police were everywhere.
They were. Detective Liddy and the others listened to Mackerly and Anderson from the car.
They had a discussion about what Bill Anderson was to testify to and whether or not Bill Anderson should lie for Alan Mackerly. Bill Anderson even asked Alan Mackerly that if he did refuse to testify and was put in jail, if Alan Mackerly would come forward and then tell the truth, and Alan Mackerly assured him that he would.
Mackerly didn't want to continue talking in the house. He led Anderson outside.
Told anyone else what you've told me? No.
This whole thing was supposed to take place at Bill Anderson's kitchen table and no place else. And so when you heard Alan Mackerly say, "Let's take a walk," we were concerned that he was walking Bill Anderson out somewhere to eliminate him.
You told anyone else what you told me? No, nobody.
The property was large and covered with dense foliage.
Will you come?
They could have walked anywhere. But Mackerly unknowingly walked Anderson close to the surveillance team.
My car is parked only a matter of probably 80 or 100 feet from Mackerly and Anderson. And we could hear distinctly on the transmitter their footsteps as they walked through the gravel, and they walked closer to my vehicle with very little coverage concealing my vehicle. The four of us sat there frozen in our car wondering, is this whole thing going to be blown because he's going to see us?
Their case and their cooperating witness were in jeopardy.
I'm sorry.
If the investigators were discovered, they might not be able to protect Anderson from Mackerly's rage. Investigators in Florida watched as cooperating witness Bill Anderson met with murder suspect Alan Mackerly. Anderson was wearing a wire trying to get Mackerly to discuss the murder of Frank Black. New Jersey Detective Lee Liddy feared what Mackerly might do if he caught a glimpse of the nearby investigators.
The two of them walked outside, which was very tense for all the investigators involved, because at this point we have no control over what happens, where they go, or what they say. And because they were walking, and because of the pant leg of Bill Anderson rubbing and the movement of the clothes, it was very difficult to pick up conversation. So at that point, we really weren't sure what was happening.
Before Mackerly could spot the surveillance team, Anderson steered him away. Investigators now had incriminating statements on tape, but not a direct confession. They needed more. Mackerly's alleged accomplice, Lisa Costello, remained in jail. She had been charged with contempt of court 3 months earlier for refusing to honor her subpoena. Agents would seek information from her friends to increase the pressure on the hostile witness. They interviewed Costello's former roommate. She said Costello used to deal cocaine and the sedative Rufinol, which is odorless and tasteless. Depending on the dose, Rufinol can relax a person or render them unconscious. FDLE Special Agent Michael Driscoll believed Costello sedated Frank Black with the drug.
We suspected, matter of fact, from day one, that at some point Lisa and Frank Black may have gone to dinner or for drinks, and she was able to do that. Because Frank Black would not willingly or knowingly go into Alan Mackerly's house.
Hoping this information might pressure her into talking, a prosecutor met with Lisa Costello in jail. He told her that if she didn't cooperate, she would not have immunity. She could be charged with murder. Costello remained silent, despite the warnings of prosecutor Robert Belanger.
And Lisa Costello could have walked out of that jail cell any day simply by coming out and honoring that subpoena and telling us what she knew about the case. But she was a tough enough witness that she sat in jail on a civil contempt.
Despite Costello's silence, investigators pressed on. Assistant State Attorney Lawrence Merman felt they were ready to arrest.
We had an ear witness to a confession who was a very close friend of the defendant. We had a motive, we had circumstantial evidence. It was a very strong case.
On August 29th, agents began aerial surveillance on Alan McAlee. A ground team assembled around the perimeter of the suspect's house. They made sure he was alone inside. That evening, the arrest team positioned themselves by his door. They would wait until he emerged to take him down in the open.
Hold him right there! Hold him right there!
When he stepped out with his dog, the team struck. The stunned suspect offered no resistance. 7 months after Frank Black vanished, Alan McAlee was arrested for kidnapping and murder. With no physical evidence, prosecutors prepared for a difficult trial. When McAlee's arrest hit the news, they received a call from a man with information on the case. The man agreed to give a statement. Robert Senadazian was Alan McAlee's son-in-law. He said that he'd received a call from McAlee on February 25th, the day after Black arrived in Florida. McAlee asked him to come over to help him clean his house. When Senadazian arrived on Monday, February 26th, he saw that McAlee and Costello had already begun major renovations in the foyer. The carpet had been ripped up, and parts of the wall had been removed.
Okay, I guess the next thing to do is we need to take this man.
Senadazian told prosecutor Robert Belanger that McAlee explained why.
Alan McAlee told Rob Senadazian, Frank Black was at my home last Saturday. And even Senadazian knew the relationship between Alan McAlee and Frank Black and expressed some surprise. Why would Frank Black be at your home? And Alan clearly didn't want to talk about it. He just said, given the O.J. Simpson trial, DNA evidence, we got to make sure there's not even a hair of Frank Black's found in this home.
Senadazian swore that he never saw any blood. Special Agent Miller asked if Senadazian had questioned McAlee about what had happened.
His response was something to the effect that he didn't have to ask his father-in-law, that he knew something really bad had occurred there in the house, and that they were in fact cleaning up a mess.
They used an industrial vacuum cleaner to clean the entire area. Then McAlee asked Senadazian to help him haul the debris to the local dump. Senadazian told investigators that he and McAlee discarded sheetrock carpeting and even the vacuum cleaner in the Martin County landfill. His statement corroborated Bill Anderson's story.
Anderson told us that McAlee had told him that he had killed Frank Black in the entry to his house. And now we had Senadazian telling us that immediately after Frank Black's disappearance, he was summoned to that house to do a remodeling job or a makeover of the foyer area right where Anderson states McAlee said he shot Frank Black.
In the middle of August, an evidence recovery team arrived at the landfill. Based on records, investigators were able to determine where the items were likely dumped 6 months earlier on February 26th. The recovery team searched for anything that could be traced back to McAlee's home. For 3 hot days, investigators scoured a specific area of the landfill.
The landfill management was able to determine by the date exactly where it was. And it was in a spot that was actually feasible and possible that we'd find it. So we did that. We got the equipment with the sheriff's office, crime scene and so forth, and we dug it up and we found carpeting that we believed was from Mackley's residence.
Investigators found portions of sheetrock and a vacuum cleaner that matched the description Sanitasian had given. They brought the items to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Forensics Laboratory for analysis. Despite their strong suspicions, lab analysts were unable to conclusively match any of the items to Mackley's house. Technicians also processed Mackley's foyer and retrieved traces of what appeared to be blood. Unfortunately, DNA markers found in the samples could not be exclusively matched to Frank Black's DNA. It was another dead end. Investigators still had no physical evidence. Agents pressed on, continuing to build a strong circumstantial case for State Prosecutor Belanger by further corroborating Sanitasian's story about the cleanup.
The FBI went to Walmarts and Kmarts and got receipts where Alan Mackley was buying bleach and Comet and cleaning supplies and trash bags and duct tape and all the tools and implements he needed to clean up a crime scene.
Just before trial, investigators received disturbing news. Martin County Jail inmates claimed that Mackley had hired someone to kill Bill Anderson. Mackley knew that if he could prevent Anderson from testifying, prosecutors would have to drop their case. Early in 1997, murder suspect Alan Mackley was held without bond for the murder of Frank Black. While he was behind bars, investigators learned he had ordered the murder of witness Bill Anderson.
As of that point, the security for Bill Anderson tremendously increased, and we began making arrangements to have Bill and his wife go into the Federal Witness Protection Program.
Mackley's would-be hitman would not be a reliable witness in court, so attempted murder-for-hire charges against Mackley were dropped. Alan Mackley's trial began on January 20th, 1998. Even without the victim's body, Florida State Prosecutor Robert Belanger was confident in the case.
There's case law going back to Old England where murderers have been prosecuted without a body successfully, and the courts have said that we don't reward people because they successfully disposed of the body. You can still prove death through circumstantial evidence like any other fact in a case, by person's habits and routines, by the fact that they didn't pack for a long trip, by declarations of intent, I'm going to go to Florida. All these things combined demonstrated pretty conclusively that Frank Black was dead. Nevertheless, that is a source of frustration.
Mr. Mackley told me
the prosecution's main witness, Bill Anderson, recalled what he knew about Frank Black's murder. Prosecutors filled in the gaps and detailed the events of February 24th, 1996, the last day Black was seen alive. Mackley's lover, Lisa Costello, picked up Frank Black at the West Palm Beach airport that evening. She took him to Mackley's house on the pretense of meeting other business partners. Black was unaware that he had just stepped into the home of his bitter rival.
So how long have you been in the busing business? Years.
While Costello and Black discussed the lucrative business deal, prosecutors believe Costello dropped a capsule of Rufinol into his drink.
If you'd like, I'd be happy to.
Black would not have noticed. The powerful sedative is odorless, colorless, and tasteless. The two talked while Costello waited for the drug to take effect. As planned, Mackley took over at that point.
Could have swallowed.
He had Costello remove Black's wallet.
Hey, why don't you go get changed?
Later, they would use his credit cards to create a false trail for police. Black was powerless due to the heavy sedative. Finally in control of his rival, Mackerly's hatred boiled over. In the foyer, he put a gun to Black's head. Mackerly had to get rid of the evidence. He wrapped the body and murder weapon in plastic. Using one of his powerboats, he would later dump the body about 16 miles offshore.
Took the body out about 20 miles.
Anderson testified that Mackerly said he had to stab through the plastic in Black's body several times to get it to sink. He then returned home to finish cleaning up. He tore out anything that had been stained by blood or human tissue. Using bleach, they scrubbed the entire area clean. Anderson's testimony was bolstered by powerful circumstantial evidence. Phone calls linking Mackerly and Black, Robert Sanadagian's story of the cleanup, and covert recordings from Anderson's house.
Thunder will rise. How do you find the defendant?
It was enough to convince the jury.
Guilty as charged.
On February 4th, 1998, they found Alan Mackerly guilty of kidnapping and murder. After Mackerly's trial, prosecutors turned to Lisa Costello.
When I looked, I saw the dead body.
Faced with murder charges, she finally gave a full statement as to the events that led to Frank Black's death.
Ultimately, she entered a plea to third-degree murder and false imprisonment, which are lesser included offenses. She was sentenced to 10 years in the Florida State Prison.
An appeals court overturned Mackerly's kidnapping conviction, finding that Frank Black traveled to Florida on his own volition. But the murder conviction stood. Alan Mackerly was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Although Frank Black's body has not yet been recovered, his killer, Alan Mackerly, will never go free.